At the time I make this video, it's February 2022, and we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Luke Cage. In this video, we're going to take a look at his origin in the comics, the folklore and pop culture that influenced the character's creation, key issues and storylines about this character from the comic sources, how Marvel has updated this character to keep him relevant for the times, and of course, the live-action web series on Netflix that was a big hit. Welcome back to Comic Power. I'm your host, Comic Killer 72, and welcome to another Comic Power special report. At the time I make this video, it was Black History Month, so I'm going to put a big emphasis on black superheroes. Black heroes are hot in comics right now, but today we're going to talk about one of the early influential ones. Please subscribe to this channel and click on the notification button as well. It will remind you when new videos drop. Alright, let's get right into it. The man of the hour is Carl Lucas, also known as Luke Cage, also known as Power Man. His first appearance is in Luke Cage Hero for Hire #1, released in 1972. It made history as the first black superhero to headline his own title. Some other notable black superheroes that predate him, such as Black Panther, Falcon, and John Stewart Green Lantern, were around, but they did not headline a title. So before we get into the specific origin of Luke Cage, let's look at what happened in pop culture that influenced the making of his character. And that's a mashup of two things: American strongman folklore and Blaxploitation movies. First, the folklore. Luke Cage is inspired by the legend of John Henry, about a big black man who strong as an ox around the mid-19th century, who works as a laborer building tunnels for trains to pass through. It has to be done by hand, there's no other way to get it done, and it's hard work. One day, the bosses bring in some new fancy machines, and all the workers are scared that they're going to be replaced and out of a job. And John Henry decides to challenge the machine versus his manual labor and the construction of a tunnel. Through a bitter battle, John Henry actually wins and beats the machine, but he dies in the end. Obviously, this is a cautionary tale about automation and replacing people with machines. The other influence I mentioned are Blaxploitation movies. These were low-budget films in the 1970s in which black people got to be action heroes for the first time in cinema. This trend gets started by Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, released in 1971, written, directed, and starred in by Melvin Van Peebles, one of the few black directors at the time working in Hollywood who wants to make this indie adventure, but the studios won't finance it, so he goes to Bill Cosby to borrow the money. I'm not making this up. It has all the staples that were copied by future Blaxploitation movies about ultra-masculine black man that doesn't take any shit, gets all of the ladies, and gets in a battle against a man which has his own crooked cops. It also has a soundtrack which introduced to the world a little-known band at the time named Earth, Wind & Fire. Quick sidebar, Melvin Van Peebles is the father of Mario Van Peebles, most famous for directing and writing New Jack City, which gave us Wesley Snipes as Nino Brown and Ice-T playing an undercover cop, a role he's been playing for the last 30 years. After Sweetback is a big underground hit in 1970, Hollywood follows suit in 1971 with Shaft, about an ultra-masculine black man who works as a detective, who gets all the ladies, takes no shit, and takes down the man. It's a huge hit with a very thin budget, so Hollywood gives us more than we ever wanted in Blaxploitation. You basically have two different categories of this type of film: the ultra-masculine black man who wants to take down the man with a big-ass gun, or the criminal who wants to make one last score before getting out of the game. All of these films had bad cinematography, bad acting, very bad fake karate and stunt coordination, very predictable scripts with plenty of plot holes, but I absolutely loved them. My dad was a big fan of them and got them all on VHS in the 80s. So I really enjoy this genre, and you can see the tropes of it pop up in Tarantino films. Now that you understand what influenced the creation of this character, let's talk about more of his early days. As I stated before, this character makes his first appearance in Luke Cage Hero for Hire #1 from June of 1972, making him the first black superhero to headline his own title. His background comics is that he's a black man in prison, and because comics, he goes through a version of the super soldier program given to Captain America. He survives the experiment and comes out with superpowers, with super strength, unstoppable stamina, and unbreakable skin. We're talking about the Weapon Plus program here. So Captain America was Weapon 1, the Man-Thing was Weapon 4, Luke Cage was Weapon 6, Wolverine was Weapon 10, also known as Weapon X, and so forth. So our hero Luke Cage returns to Harlem and adopts this costume, which is problematic, but we'll come back to that. And this is where he becomes Luke Cage Hero for Hire and beats up on pimps, pushers, and the criminal underground based in Harlem, New York. We get introduced to some noble villains which were introduced in live action, such as Diamondback in issue #2, and the crime lord Cottonmouth, introduced in issue #19. Sales for his title started off really great in the beginning, but they started to stagnate after about 4 or 5 years. So they did a tag team with him in issue number 48 with Iron Fist, another character introduced in the early 1970s, a martial arts based character introduced in Marvel Premiere number 15 in May of 1974. So Iron Fist got spinned off into his own title, and sales were just okay. In the Luke Cage title, sales also were just okay. So Marvel said, what the hell, just team them up. In issue number 48, with Iron Fist guest starring with such a success, Marvel decided to team them up permanently in the rebranded Power Man and Iron Fist issue number 50, released in 1978. And it was a successful run, running well into the mid-1980s. Connecting these characters forever, they have a special bond and chemistry that really works as a duo. In comics, animation, and live action, which we're going to get to in just a little bit. Knowing all this background information lets you know why this character is so legendary going into his 5th decade of existence. He's one of my all-time favorite characters, but there are some problems with this character that we need to address, and we're going to do that right now. And that's going to be his uniform overall. It's loaded with issues here. Let's start with the tiara. That's just so unnecessary. Wonder Woman has a tiara on an ultra masculine male superhero. That just does not work. Then there's the boots. Hey, this was a staple of comic book creation going back to the 1940s through the 1980s. Captain America, Taskmaster, and countless other characters had this design, which is now outdated. And most controversial of all is the chains and the wristbands that look like handcuffs. Considering that the character is African American and real life black slaves came to America in chains this way, this is kind of problematic considering that his creators are 4 white guys: Archie Goodwin, George Tuska, Roy Thomas, and John Romita Sr. They are all credited as a co-creator of this character. On one hand, you could look at the chains as being a black man breaking free of the chains of being in prison, but at the end of the day, his original design makes him look like a big black buck runaway slave. So this has been fixed in modern versions of this character. They ditched the tiara, the goofy boots, and of course the chains had to go. And he normally wears wristbands that look like something that would be useful in battle instead of a callback to handcuffs. And they normally keep him in a yellow shirt. That's kind of like his thing, like Charlie Brown. That's just a color he's associated with, so that's going to stay. Another original problem with the character was they didn't make him very smart, and since he had white creators and white writers, they wrote him with a lot of job talking about how they thought black people talk. And going back and reading this stuff is kind of cringe-worthy. And that brings us to one of his most infamous stories ever written, which is tragically and ironically funny, where he gets into a battle with Dr. Doom over a $200 debt. Seriously, $200. This is from Luke Cage issues number 8 and number 9 from 1973, where he flies all the way to Dr. Doom's country in Latvia in Europe in a Fantastic Four craft for $200. And look at this dialogue. Dr. Doom says, "When my men reported a crazy black man in a Fantastic Four's craft, I knew it had to be you." And Luke Cage, who's there just for his money, says, "Where's my money, honey?" Okay. That's hilarious. So I have no idea if Marvel was intentionally trying to be funny and hilarious with this. If not, then it's ironically funny because it's completely ridiculous. This is unspeakably stupid in a Mystery Science 3000 type of way. Oh, and it gets worse. Check this out. "Ha ha ha, you are the ultimate, Cage. I have never seen your like. Would it do me any good to try to hire you for this new assignment?" Working for you is a stone drag. "May I thank you for saving my life?" "Yeah, but don't. If you had gotten dead, there'd be nobody for me to collect from." Wow, Marvel published this back in the 1970s and thought it was perfectly fine. It's both equally offensive and funny as hell at the same time. What are you gonna do? So 1970s Luke Cage, stronger than an elephant, but dumber than a rock, and all about his paper. You dig? We also had an editorial inconsistency on just how strong Luke Cage was. He could go toe-to-toe with Dr. Doom with no problem, but in this panel you can see he loses to Spider-Man pretty easily. Spider-Man is not a wimp, he's pretty strong, but he's still a street-level hero, and he's not supposed to be able to take on anyone who is in the realm of taking on Dr. Doom. That's just massively inconsistent. And then Spider-Man mocks him and throws his job talk back at him. Dig. So those were some of the problems, but Marvel has updated the character. They ditched the tiara, the goofy boots, and of course the chains and stuff that had to go. He's still unbelievably strong, but he's not dumb as a box of rocks anymore. They made him a whole lot smarter. If a character is truly great, it can overcome a lot of deficiencies. I mean, hey, they did this to Batman back in the 1960s, and he survived that. So Luke Cage is in good hands going forward. They're using him correctly over at Marvel. Now let's take a look at Luke Cage in live action on Netflix. There have been talk about making Luke Cage into a live action hero for a long time, and some fans were pushing for Terry Crews to play the role. He's a well-known actor and has the physique to play the role, but he's more of a comedic actor like the Old Spice commercial. So I never considered him a strong contender. So when it was announced that Michael Coulter was going to play the role, I was very excited for that because he's been a very good supporting actor in background roles for a long time. And he would not make a mockery of the character like Terry would. You know how this went down when Marvel announced they were going to partner with Netflix in 2015 and do the Defenders with some street level heroes, 3 of them which had never appeared in live action before. Daredevil, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Jessica Jones. They would all get their own individual shows and then teamed them up at the end as the Defenders. Daredevil was the most known of these characters, so releasing him first made the most sense. Charlie Cox is the lead role of Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, and Vincent D'Onofrio as the Kingpin were just amazing. People thought that Luke Cage would be next, but they went with the least known of the characters, which was Jessica Jones, which was played by Kristen Ritter and is a underrated psychological horror type of drama. And the antagonist is the Purple Man, a villain who can control people's minds through pheromones. She's a woman with superpowers who failed at the superhero life, so she opens a detective agency, which she calls Alias Investigations. This is all pulled from her comic series, which started back in 2001 and ran for about 25 issues. And guess who showed up in that comic series? Luke Cage. So he makes his first live action appearance, guest starring in the Jessica Jones show first. And it doesn't take very long for them to engage in some very steamy hot sex. This is consistent with the Luke Cage character, considering that he's inspired by Blaxploitation characters. He must be the ladies' man who hits everything moving. And it's consistent with the comics because these characters wind up having a relationship and having a daughter together in the future. So the Netflix third release is Luke Cage. It becomes a big hit, especially with African American audiences. And they film it right there live on location in Harlem, which makes it feel more authentic. Michael Coulter does an excellent job portraying the character. They show how he's bulletproof, and trying to punch him is probably not a good idea. And we get an incredible performance from Mahershala Ali, who plays Cottonmouth. He looks like this in the show, but he looks like this in the original comics. They give Luke a catchphrase, and Rosario Dawson as Night Nurse does an excellent performance as well. But the glue of the show to me was Simone Missick playing Mercedes, aka Misty Knight. This character made her first appearance in Marvel Premiere featuring Iron Fist number 21. She's a former cop that becomes a private investigator, and after she loses her arm in a bombing, a new bionic one is donated to her by Tony Stark. As you might expect, Misty Knight is inspired by Blaxploitation characters as well, most specifically those played by Pam Grier, who was basically the first female black action hero, and this was probably my first real female celebrity crush. I'm just gonna leave this right here for you. So when Misty Knight first shows up in Luke Cage, she's still undercover with the police department, and she meets Luke Cage, who's currently working for Cottonmouth at his club. And being that they're both action hero, Blaxploitation inspired characters, it is law that they must get together and have a steamy sex scene, something you don't see in a lot of Marvel projects. The Netflix shows had R-rated violence, language, and huge sexuality. So these characters have a strong connection to comics, so it makes sense they had a strong connection also in live action. After Luke Cage came Iron Fist. I'm not going to take the time to relive that right now. It wasn't a very good show. And like I said before, they wound up teaming up all 4 of their heroes into one team called the Defenders. There was a season 2 of Luke Cage, and it wasn't as good as season 1 to me, but it was still pretty solid. And he takes on a new villain called the Bushmaster, which was first introduced in Iron Fist number 15. In the comics, he looked like this, but in live action, they made it look less comic book. So all of the Defenders on Netflix got their own individual season 2. They even squeezed in the Punisher series real quick. But then, poof, they were all gone and they got canceled, and there were no more seasons after that. It wasn't because of ratings, it was because Netflix and Marvel fell apart because Disney decided to do Disney Plus, where they would take on Netflix as a competitor. So it was disappointing, but understandable from a business perspective. The Netflix series were loosely based to the MCU, but some of the characters with the original actors playing them are now firmly in the MCU, such as Charlie Cox reprising his role as Matt Murdock in Spider-Man 3. Of course, the Kingpin showing up in the Hawkeye web series. series. So, what's next for the Luke Cage character? Is Michael Coulter going to reprise his role in the MCU? I hope so. He's a great power man. So, to recap, the Luke Cage character made his first appearance in Luke Cage Hero for Hire #1 in 1972. He celebrates his 50th anniversary in comics in 2022. He got his superpowers from an experiment. It was a variation of the Weapon Plus program. He possesses super strength, stamina, and has unbreakable skin and is bulletproof. His creation was influenced by The Legend of John Henry and Blaxploitation movies. After getting out of prison, he returns to Harlem and he's a hero for hire. In the original comics version, he was a former gang member that was falsely framed and sent to prison. In the TV show, he was a former cop that was framed and sent to prison. His original costume had him looking like a runaway slave, so it's been updated, which is a good touch. His first appearance in live action was on Netflix and played by Michael Coulter, who I hope reprises his role. He is Carl Lucas, also known as Luke Cage, also known as Power Man, the first black superhero to headline his own title. You know the drill. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, give it a thumbs up, and share these videos on social media so others learn about the Comic Power channel. While you're here, be sure to watch other videos out of my archive, such as who I think are the top 10 black superheroes of all time, and are the X-Men just a metaphor for the black struggle for civil rights in America. And once again, thank you to my subscribers and my viewers who support Comic Power. Until next time, this is Comic Killer 72 for Comic Power saying bye-bye.